For there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Over 400 years ago, William Shakespeare dropped that famous line in Hamlet. And sure, it sounds deeply philosophical, right? But what if I told you it's also cutting edge science? Today, we're diving into how your mind doesn't just passively interpret reality, it actively shapes your physical biology, especially when the pressure's on.
Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're looking at this really fascinating 2023 research paper led by Dr. Crum and her team over at Stanford University. It's called Evaluation of the Rethink Stress Mindset Intervention, a metacognitive approach to changing mindsets. Now I know that's a mouth, but stick with me because this isn't just academic theory. It actually offers a totally practical, road-tested framework for fundamentally rewiring how our brains and bodies handle adversity. Okay, let's dive into this with a pretty provocative question. What if your beliefs about stress are actually way more dangerous than the stress itself? I mean, think about it. We've literally been told our entire lives that stress is this toxic, terrible force we have to manage, avoid, or just medicate away. But the research we're looking at today completely flips that script. It challenges everything we think we know and gets us ready for a massive paradigm shift. To get there, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the paradox of stress. Second, what is metacognition? Third, 3 steps to rethink stress. Fourth, real-world results. And finally, number 5, the ultimate stress test. All right, part 1, the paradox of stress, and exactly why our cultural narrative is incomplete. So the prevailing societal myth is basically that stress is purely a killer, right? Something to be avoided at absolutely all costs. But there's this massive paradox in stress research. Yes, chronic stress can absolutely be debilitating, but an enormous body of research also proves that stress can be enhancing. Believe it or not, the biological stress response can actually sharpen your cognition, boost your immune system, and give you the energy to smash through obstacles. Now, researchers have actually tried teaching people this stress is enhancing mindset before, and it worked for a little bit. The big problem? Fragility. The second people left the lab and, say, turned on the evening news or read a terrifying public health warning about the dangers of stress, their shiny new positive mindset just shattered. They'd only been given one-sided info, so it completely fell apart in the real world. Which brings us to part 2. What is metacognition? Choosing your lens. So, the crucial point here is that this metacognitive approach doesn't force you to blindly believe that all stress is universally good. That's not realistic. Instead, it teaches you what a mindset actually is. Think of a mindset as a lens, and whichever lens you happen to look through tends to create self-fulfilling biological effects in your body. Metacognition is simply the awareness that you have the power to consciously swap out your lenses. You can choose the stress is enhancing lens, not because it's the absolute undeniable truth in every single situation, but because picking that lens is highly useful. It produces real, measurable biological and performance benefits. You aren't denying reality at all, you're just strategically choosing the most functional lens to view it through. Moving right along to part 3, 3 steps to rethink stress. Let's look at a practical framework. The researchers built this incredibly simple 3-step framework that you can start using today. Step 1. Acknowledge the stress. Don't push it away. If you have a massive deadline looming and your heart is pounding out of your chest, acknowledge it. Research actually shows that just putting a label on your stress shifts your brain's activity from those automatic fear centers over to conscious processing regions. Okay, step 2. Welcome the stress. Sounds crazy, right? But think about it. We only stress about things we actually care about. So welcome the stress as a clear signal that something of deep personal value is on the line. Greet it with a sort of bring it on mentality. And finally, step 3. Utilize the stress. Please don't waste your precious energy trying to force yourself to calm down. Instead, judo flip that anxious energy. Your racing heart is literally pumping more oxygen to your brain so you can focus better. So channel that biological energy directly into crushing the task in front of you. Okay, part 4, real-world results. This is where they test the theory in finance and tech. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what happens when you put this into practice. During the brutal 2009 recession, researchers tested this out at a massive Fortune 500 finance company. Just 4 weeks after a really simple 2-hour training, the metacognitive group, which you can see represented here by the black line, saw huge drops in negative health symptoms. We're talking less anxiety, fewer backaches, and on top of that, significant spikes in how well they worked with their teams. Compared to the waitlist control group on the gray line, they were literally healthier and performing far better at work, all while navigating a devastating global recession. But what's truly amazing is how well this whole thing scaled up. Over at a giant tech company, they didn't even bother with expensive in-person trainers. They just deployed these simple online multimedia modules. And guess what? The effect replicated flawlessly. Tech employees who took the quick online course experienced the same massive drops in negative health symptoms and actually boosted their technical work performance compared to the control group. It completely proved that this intervention is scalable, super cost-effective, and highly adaptable to entirely different high-stress corporate environments. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the ultimate stress test, sustaining the mindset through a crisis. Let's walk through this super ambitious timeline together. On day A, the researchers gave participants the metacognitive intervention. Then, about 8 to 16 days later on day B, they basically went on the offensive and deliberately attacked the participants' newly formed mindsets. They forced them to read and watch heavily conflicting, super negative information about how stress supposedly destroys the human body, information sourced from major reputable health clinics. They really wanted to see if this new metacognitive shield would hold up against the classic stress is a killer narrative. And you know what? It did. Because the participants actually understood why they were choosing their specific mindset, all that conflicting information just bounced right off them. But then, absolute serendipity struck. The timeline hit days C. 6 to 9 months after the initial training, the whole world was suddenly plunged into the terrifying, chaotic early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the researchers immediately jumped in to follow up. The conclusion here was absolutely wild. 8 whole months later, right in the middle of the intense uncertainty and sheer terror of a global pandemic, the group that got the initial metacognitive training still held on to their adaptive, stress-is-enhancing mindset. Even more profoundly, when compared to the control groups, they reported measurably fewer negative health symptoms and significantly less negative emotion during the crisis. The psychological armor they built from a brief little online module literally lasted for months and shielded them during one of the most stressful global events in modern history. And that leads us straight to the absolute core takeaway of this entire explainer. Metacognition is the key to resilience. Just having someone tell you to think positively about stress, yeah, that doesn't work when the world inevitably throws terrifying, conflicting information right in your face. But understanding exactly how your own mind works, recognizing that your mindset is this active, self-fulfilling lens that you actually have control over, that is exactly what allows you to weather the storm. You don't have to just be a helpless victim to your biological stress response. You can step up and be the architect of it. So I'm going to leave you with this. The next time you're facing a massive challenge, maybe it's a brutal deadline, a really difficult conversation, or a sudden moment of crisis, and you feel your heart start to race in your chest, which mindset are you going to choose? Are you going to let the stress debilitate you, or will you acknowledge it, welcome it, and utilize it to completely enhance your reality? Because the choice, quite literally, is all yours. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep learning.